President, I ask that we suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you. Last week, the Senate passed the Sergeant First Class Sean Cooley and Specialist Christopher Horton Congressional Gold Star Family Fellowship Program Act. I would like to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who lent their support, because creation of this program was a long time coming. I've spent the past few years working with and talking with Gold Star families, and the one thing they've consistently told me is that they want a more powerful voice here on Capitol Hill. This legislation will create a Senate fellowship program open only to Gold Star family members. These fellows will have the opportunity to come to Washington at no cost to their families and work within the system our service members work so very hard to defend. And Madam President, we thank you for your service in defense of this nation. Just as we here in the Senate are bound together by a duty to serve the country, Gold Star families are also bound together by a common thread of loss, grief, sacrifice. It has been my privilege to work with so many of them, and I hope that these fellowships will create a renewed sense of healing and purpose in the hearts of those who come to work with us here in Washington. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the remainder of my remarks be placed separately in the record.
Without objection.
Madam President, it is the week before Thanksgiving, and the American people are still looking for evidence that President Biden and his lieutenants in Congress took their oaths of office seriously. I've said it before, but it does bear repeating. The anger and division that has held the American discourse hostage for the past 11 months was not created by an increased desire to engage in contrarian politics. Nobody asked for this, for what is happening now. No, this is a direct result of President Biden and the Democrats' refusal to actually govern and deliver for the American people. They have been so focused on creating a narrative that they have neglected the fundamentals and ultimately the people who put them into their positions of power. This isn't just my opinion. I have heard it from thousands of Tennesseans that I have visited with, many over the past week. Yes, this is their assumption. It is their assumption that anything the White House does is coming from a place of bad faith. It is not coming from how do we make the lives of Tennesseans and all Americans better. It comes from a place of how do we gut our institutions? How do we roll back? And how do we exert our control, power, control, government control, big government? That is what people are seeing. Think about it. It has taken only 11 months for the people to lose their faith in this administration. No amount of ad hoc bipartisanship is going to pull the Biden administration out of the hole that they have dug for themselves by refusing to do the bare minimum for the American people. They've had 11 months to do something, to do anything, to show us they care about more than politics. And the fact that they haven't been willing to do that has been probably the biggest failure of President Biden to date. And I think that's probably saying something. When people look at what's happening in Washington, here is what they're seeing. They see a president who proactively kills jobs, who destroyed our potential for energy independence, who let conditions along our southern border descend into chaos rather than challenge the disgraceful racial politics pushed by radicals in the Democratic Party. and they see their elected representatives waging war on our most fundamental constitutional rights, eroding ballot integrity, and providing cover for disastrous economic policies that have done nothing but kill jobs and drive prices through the roof. Yes, inflation is real. Congressional Democrats have squandered an entire year creating an illusion of enthusiasm for their broken agenda, which is a feat they were only able to accomplish by refusing to acknowledge the damage caused by their reckless tax and spending spree. If they had even pretended to prioritize appropriations, the debt ceiling, or passing a fiscally responsible budget, they might have had a chance to salvage a little bit of credibility. But oh no, that's not what they did. The American people are living in the real world where debt burdens matter, and you can't fire up a money printer if you blow your budget or have a wish list you can't afford. What the American people see isn't just a refusal to govern, but a refusal to acknowledge that these problems matter. These things actually matter to people. How much we spend matters. Being job and business friendly matters. Integrity, it matters. For almost a year, the Biden administration has been hiding from allegations that the Obama-Biden Justice Department spied on an incoming president. Back in August, I led a letter with more than 40 of my Republican colleagues demanding an update on the status of Special Counsel Durham's inquiry into the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. The American people have been waiting a long time to see those results. There is nothing the administration can do to force them to accept or even tolerate the malice and corruption we know fueled the actions of the Obama-Biden Justice Department, and equal justice matters to the American people. But I suppose it's too much to ask that our chief law enforcement officers stay true to the law when the president himself has been so preoccupied with this reckless agenda that it appears he forgot about his role of being commander-in-chief. In terms of governance, national defense is about as fundamental as it gets. And here we are, a week before Thanksgiving, and just now we're getting the NDAA to the floor. I, along with other members of the Armed Services Committee, negotiated and deliberated our way through 143 amendments, many of those bipartisan, and we approved the final product 23-3. Now, that's about as bipartisan as it gets, but you haven't seen that come to the floor. Even the House Democrats working on their own version of the bill have had enough with the Senate, and they're saying so publicly. They understand, just as we do, that this country will have to be able to defend itself. We should be doing all we can to prioritize defense policy, because you can be sure our competitors and our adversaries abroad are doing all they can to elevate themselves, to defend themselves. Tonight, President Biden is scheduled to meet virtually with Xi Jinping and to discuss, and I quote, ways to responsibly manage the competition, quote, between the U.S. and China. Only it's really not competition, they're our adversary. We don't need a summit to figure out a response to Chinese aggression. The solution is staring us in the face. If you want to manage the competition, you set yourself up to win the fight. That's how you manage your competitors. That's it. No secret. And I don't discount the importance of diplomacy, but Xi Jinping and his lieutenants in the Chinese Communist Party have proven time and again that their standing operating procedure is rooted in a desire to control the world order, rather than to work within it. Competition, they're not interested in. Dominance, yes, they are interested in. If we start engaging with China from anything other than a position of strength, we will lose. And right now, Joe Biden projects nothing but weakness. For almost 3 years, I have chronicled in excruciating detail the war the Chinese Communist Party is waging against our nation's ideals. I've done this in hopes that my colleagues across the aisle would understand that delaying action or maintaining the status quo will not save us from our most belligerent and dangerous adversary. And yet, somehow, seeing it all laid out in black and white wasn't even enough to get action. Seeing evidence of genocide in Xinjiang wasn't enough. Reading verified reports that Beijing manipulated multiple international organizations in their shameless cover-up of the origins of COVID-19, that wasn't enough. Listening to Chinese officials threaten our pharmaceutical and medical supply chains, not enough. Watching the Chinese Communist Party attack freedom fighters in Hong Kong and threaten our friends in Taiwan wasn't enough. Seeing the pernicious effects of the Belt and Road Initiative on the global balance of power wasn't enough. Not even the knowledge that Beijing is closer than ever to testing the limits of our nuclear deterrence capabilities. That was not enough. Madam President, I yield to the majority leader for the purpose of filing cloture.
I thank my colleague from Tennessee for yielding, and in a few minutes I intend to take the first procedural step to begin consideration of the annual defense policy bill. With cooperation, the Senate can and should move through this important legislation that we attend to each year. This year, we will amend the defense bill to include the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, a historic manufacturing and innovation bill that the Senate passed earlier this year on a strong bipartisan basis and which will help tackle our nation's supply chain crisis. Our supply chain crisis needs attending to, and we cannot wait. Members from both sides of the aisle have expressed interest in getting this done. Passing USICA would be an essential, far-reaching step that Congress can take to help fight inflation, help increase American workers' wages, and relieve strained supply chains, particularly with regard to current devastating chip shortage, which is hurting the auto industry, the tech industry, and so many other industries. We cannot allow us to become dependent on foreign chips, especially when we do the groundbreaking technology. We're also working with the Speaker and our colleagues in the House and Republican colleagues in the Senate to find a path forward to get this important legislation over the finish line before the end of the year. It's also my intention to have an amendment vote on the bipartisan legislation repealing the 2002 Iraq War AUMF. This measure was reported on a bipartisan basis out of the Foreign Relations Committee earlier this year, and the NDAA is the logical place to have that vote on the Senate floor. The Iraq War has been over for nearly a decade. An authorization passed in 2002 is no longer necessary in 2021. And in no way will repealing this measure impact our ability to keep Americans safe nor impact our relationship with Iraq. We will have other votes on amendments on the defense bill as well. I look forward to working with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to move this important process forward. So now I'm going to move cloture on the NDA. I have some words to say about my dear colleague, Senator Leahy, some words to say on Build Back Better, but I'll come at a later moment because I know my friend from Tennessee is waiting to do those things tonight. Now, I move to proceed to legislative session.
On the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to.
I move to proceed to Calendar 144, H.R. 4350, the National Defense Authorization Act.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 144, H.R. 4350, an act to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2022 for military activities of the Department of Defense, and so forth, and for other purposes.
I send the cloture motion to the desk.
The clerk will report.
Close motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 144, H.R. 4350, an act to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2022 for military activities of the Department of Defense, and so forth, and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators as follows.
I ask consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
Finally, I ask unanimous consent that the mandatory quorum call for the cloture motion filed today, November 15th, be waived.
Without objection.
I yield the floor and thank the senator from Tennessee for her courtesy.
Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Madam President. As I was saying, it's been so difficult to get people to realize what we are facing from the Chinese Communist Party. They are an adversary. And seeing the evidence of genocide in Xinjiang didn't seem to be enough to persuade people. And then you have the reports that Beijing manipulated multiple international organizations when it comes to the origins of the COVID-19 vaccine. That wasn't enough. Hearing the Chinese officials threaten our pharmaceutical and medical supply chains in the midst of a pandemic, that didn't seem to be enough. Watching in horror as the Chinese Communist Party threatened the Hong Kong freedom fighters and as they have threatened our friends in Taiwan. That didn't seem to raise the attention for them that this is not our friend. They are not a competitor, they're an adversary. We have seen these effects of the Belt and Road Initiative on the global balance of power. They still haven't said we have to deal with China. Not even Beijing going out here and pushing their nuclear power has seemed to push some of our colleagues across the aisle as they have not paid attention to what is happening with our nuclear deterrent capabilities and what China is doing. So it leads a lot of Tennesseans that I talk to say, what is it going to take for Joe Biden and his administration to take these global threats seriously? If you look at what's going on in China and that doesn't do it, are you looking at Iran? Are you looking at Russia and how they're posturing troops there on the Ukrainian border? What is going to finally get them to say, China is an adversary? The new axis of evil with Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, these are adversaries. They are intent on global dominance and taking us down. You know, and I have to tell you, Madam President, I think that the answer to that question, as we look at these threats, it really frightens a lot of people. When I talk to our veterans, as I did last week, many of them, it frightens them when they see the nonchalance and attitude of this administration as we talk about these issues that are threatening our nation's security and freedom, home and abroad. When you talk about inflation, when you talk about crime in the streets, when you talk about what is happening in our schools, when you talk about what is happening globally, people see this as a threat to their life here. They see it as a threat to our security abroad. My hope is that what we will see is real governance and real leadership that will come from the Senate. And also, we would like to see this come from the administration, that people would see decisions made in good faith, not decisions made in bad faith, or trying to dismantle the institutions of this government. I yield the floor.